Good afternoon, everyone. I was about to say good morning as well. This has come around a bit quicker than I expected. So, my name is Lindsey Coode. I'm Head of Content at Learning Pool, and I'm here to talk to you today about personalised learning. Okay, so we've seen the move in the last few years from kind of a one-size-fits-all approach to one that's much more flexible, much more adaptive, and caters more for individual learners. It's a journey that at Learning Pool we've been looking at for a while, and we're just going to kind of talk today about some of the reasons why it's important, why it's good for learners, so kind of the importance of personalising learners, what it means for organisations and what it means for learners. We're also going to be looking at learning as an experience rather than just something that is kind of presented to you and you kind of passively take in. We're going to look also at the impact of artificial intelligence on learning. We're getting to a point now where the technology is starting to catch up with some of the stuff that we want to do, which has a big impact on what we can easily achieve. And then we'll also look at kind of what's here now and where we're going over the next few years and kind of into the future. Okay? So, why personalised learning? This lovely young lady here is Nicole. She's a member of my team. She's probably a little bit old to be considered a true millennial, but she's still a good 20 years younger than I am. So I'm going to pick on her as someone that's kind of really grown up around kind of the internet, online technology, all that kind of stuff. It's just, it's expected and it's what they're used to and it's constant. I really notice it actually that just, I think I never put my phone down, but I have got nothing on some of the kind of the younger generation. So, what does 47 years, which is, if you kind of take it from leaving university to roughly the age of retirement, what does that look like for someone coming into the workplace today? So, 29,328 cups of tea or coffee, whatever's your beverage of choice. 141 late starts. That sounds high to me. I'm sure if most people do 141 late starts, they wouldn't be doing that well in their career, but there has been kind of research done into this, so we'll take that as true. 3 big bus stops. This is at work. I'm hoping that kind of means more kind of constructive disagreements that take kind of a few days or weeks to resolve rather than kind of actual physical fights, but who knows. And 1 office romance. So that's what people coming into the workplace today have to look forward to. It's interesting, but what does that mean for learning? Okay, so I'm hoping that you will think that these figures are quite low, as you're probably learning and development professionals. So if we say that somebody spends 15 minutes a week learning, that's 1.5 days a year, that's 3 months over the 47-ish years of their kind of working life. It's quite a significant chunk, but actually to me, probably not as high as you would expect. It obviously varies hugely from people like doctors who are doing constant kind of CPD, have to keep up to date, to people that don't really do any, whether through personal choice or just are not offered those opportunities. So, but what it does mean for organisations is that it costs them an awful lot of money. We work with Barclays Bank. They have 800,000 learners. And so for each minute of training that they roll out across the company, it takes 181 days across everyone that's there. So that's how much salary they are paying. They're paying kind of 181 days. So you're looking at tens of thousands of pounds just on the lower end salaries. So it's really important that we can start to tailor learning so that people get what they needed. I mean, I think the days of kind of sitting for kind of 3-4 days in a classroom for something that you may or may not need, we have moved away from that a lot. But there is still quite a lot, particularly with e-learning, of here's an hour course on this, you need to do this, particularly things like information security, data protection. Every couple of years they get rolled out and you have to tick your boxes. But with someone like really big organisations, that is taking a lot of time. Okay, I love this quote. IBM, 2.5 quintillion. I didn't even know that quintillions existed. But yeah, that is how much data is being created every day. It probably doesn't come as a great surprise to a lot of you. We know how much information is out there. And what it does mean is that it's really hard to digest. You think you can go to Google for everything, but there's certain things, once you start researching them, that you almost Well, you feel a bit like this. You just feel like there's so much information coming at you that you don't know what to do with it, where to go. I mean, I always think a good example is trying to book a holiday. It used to be kind of probably 20 years ago that you'd go and sit down with a nice travel agent and they'd talk you through about the 3 countries that were acceptable to go to, and you'd have a nice little chat about what you wanted from your hotel and things. Whereas now, the opportunities are amazing. They're immense. There are just so many different options that you can look at. And I know that certainly when I come to look at holidays, it probably takes me about 3 attempts at least to even just get to the point where I can start actually starting to make some decisions, because you just get overwhelmed. You start looking at one thing and then it starts kind of becoming something completely different, or you go down a little avenue and you suddenly realise you wasted 2 hours Googling the best tapas bar in Barcelona rather than looking for your family holiday. So it's something that just does kind of start to take over. So this is a study that has been done on the average attention spans of human beings. It's dropped a lot, and it obviously, I actually heard someone quote a very different one earlier, which I think was about 2.5 minutes for video learning. And it does vary. I think what this probably refers to is about how long you have got to engage someone, how long you have got to capture their attention before they wander off and go and look at something else. So yeah, in 2000 it was 12 seconds, in 2013 it was 8 seconds, which means we now have an attention span shorter than a goldfish. So that goldfish going around its bowl is kind of giving a bit more kind of, I guess, mindfulness to what it's doing than we probably are a lot of the time. And we all know why that is. We know what's blamed for this. It's having your phone in your pocket. It's being able to constantly kind of look things up, jump around, and find different bits of information that you need. So another study that's done fairly regularly, I'm sure most of you, or some of you certainly will have seen this. Donald Taylor does his top learning trends each year. So in November this year, November last year, he asked learning and development professionals what their top learning trends were for 2017. So what was on their radar, what were they looking at, and what did they expect to be kind of pushing forward in their work over the next 12 months? And it's really interesting that right at the top up there is personalization. And some of the things such as artificial intelligence, games and gamification, and video are much lower down, which, I mean, to me is quite surprising, but I think it's probably more of you that this is where people see it heading. Those things are almost a given now, and people have either tried them and liked them and are using them, or they've kind of gone, actually, maybe that's not quite right for what we're trying to do, so therefore they've become slightly less important. I've noticed walking around earlier that micro-learning has been on pretty much every theatre at some point probably, and I think that again is really key, and I will talk about that slightly as we move forward, because micro-learning is really helpful when you look to personalise, because it gives you that granularity. Okay. I'll let you read that a moment. So this is about kind of thinking differently, and this probably more goes back to the kind of the millennials, the fact that we're all used to having all the information we could ever possibly need in our pockets, basically. So this kind of thing about kind of putting people into face-to-face classrooms, or kind of sheep dipping them, as we refer to it, through hour-long e-learning courses. And it gives you an idea of what learners of today expect. And they expect good experience. The learning almost needs to become invisible, so that there's a learning flow, there's a learning program that people can work through, and they just tap into it as and when it's needed. I also heard earlier somebody talking about, do we trust our learners to know when they have a skills gap? And you can't always. We know that there's compliance stuff, but there is also a lot of stuff that they can. I mean, performance reviews are a really good one. You know that you're about to go into a difficult situation, and you can actually look at what you can do to kind of prepare for that and things. So we all use learning in different ways, from the formal to the informal. So rather than looking at kind of traditional instructional design when it comes to learning and training, what we're starting to talk about more is experience design. I'm not going to go into great detail on experience design today, but I just thought if you want to have a look at it, it's quite an interesting theory. You can, if you Google it, it will come up. But I just wanted to talk about that kind of first circle that we've got there, which is empathize. So develop a deep understanding of the challenge and what experience design really focuses on. And this is where things like Uber, Deliveroo, all that kind of stuff have come from. These kind of modern app-based solutions is really thinking about what the problem is. So spending the majority of the time looking at the problem before you start trying to design solutions for a problem that maybe doesn't even exist. And doing that through talking to, in kind of learning design, talking to the learners, talking to the people that are actually there, asking them what they need. It's something that you should do in good instructional design as well, but I think it's something probably that has kind of got, it doesn't get forgotten, we all know we should do it, but actually in reality when someone goes, I need people to know this, and gives you a block of paper or a PDF document, it's very easy to just go straight into creating an e-learning course without actually looking at what the learners need. Okay, so personalised learning really starts to look more at the journey that people go on. So, and it varies at different times in their career as they move through their work. So here we've got Bob, the inductee. Bob could be anyone. I think we said for the sake of argument that he's kind of working in a call centre, but he really could be doing any job. So when he first starts, he probably needs a really good piece of macro learning. This might be an induction piece. It could be more detail on the systems. It could be that that macro piece of learning is a university education, and then they kind of are doing things as they go through. And then as he gets settled into his job, he's doing his job, he knows it quite well, he just needs little bits of information. Maybe when things change, if legislation is updated, if the company has just decided that we're going to work in a different way. So it's all about, that's kind of all about little bite-sized pieces of learning. And this is also the kind of coaching stuff. It may be that Bob is being coached by someone more senior and also starts coaching other people that are newer to the business. And then that probably flows along for a while until Bob decides that actually he wants to go to the next level. He wants to do something, he wants a promotion, or maybe he even just wants to move sideways. And then again, he probably needs a really good injection of that kind of a slightly more full-on learning experience. And then as it continues, he'll probably get some more micro-learning as he's working through as well. Okay, so this is space practice. So again, micro-learning works particularly well with space practice. Space practice is one of those theories that really hasn't gone away. I think we all know from our own experiences, if you go into a classroom or do a piece of e-learning once, the likelihood is a week later you won't be able to remember what you were told. It might be the odd bit that you do, but a lot of it you will have forgotten. So whereas if you can actually space that out, if you either apply it in your job is one way of doing space practice. If that might not happen, then it's about kind of doing, I guess, artificial kind of space practice, which is about kind of giving shorter micro-learning tasks and reminders that kind of happen in the days, weeks, months after that initial learning intervention. So with personalised learning, it's where does the learning management system fit in? The learning management system traditionally has been used as a kind of keeping an eye on our learners. So it's been tracking whether they've completed things, whether they've passed things, but it's been very much used from a management perspective. It's a reporting device. But actually, learning management systems collect a lot of data, and that data that they're collecting, we can also use to personalize learners' journeys through it. So rather than just kind of saying everybody needs to do this, this kind of level, we can actually just tailor that depending on what people are looking at and what people are responding to questions they're being asked. Okay, so personalised learning is a great idea. To do that across an organisation that has tens of thousands of learners, or even a much smaller organisation, it's going to take a lot of time. It's the kind of thing that you can do if you're doing one-to-one coaching, and it's the kind of thing we all do day to day when we're talking to people. We adapt ourselves. But you can't do that on a large scale. It's just not possible. So the impact of artificial intelligence is starting to have is that now we can get machines to do that for us. They can start to learn from people's responses. So can I just have hands up on who doesn't use or has never used artificial intelligence? Okay. It's actually highly unlikely that you've never used artificial intelligence. You might not have done, I could be wrong. But artificial intelligence is built into lots of the tools that we use online now. So, for example, Facebook, I run, okay? So I'm a member of, I think, one running group, but pretty much my whole feed comes up with, would you like to buy these trainers? Would you like to look at this? And it's the same, it's like if you click on one picture of a cat doing something, then suddenly it becomes filled with it. So it's learning based on what your responses are, things that you've liked, groups that you join. It looks at kind of what you're doing and things like that. And it's also true of Google. So Google, obviously, if you put something into a search engine, it knows where you are, and it will tailor the results. So if you search something that could be anywhere, I can't think of an example now, but rather than giving you the kind of, I suppose, let's use McDonald's. Use McDonald's in, type it into Google, it would come up with your local store. It wouldn't come up with one anywhere else in the world. It tailors it. And it also tailors it on kind of your preferences. It learns from searches that you've done before. So artificial intelligence is all around us, basically. So in terms of kind of adaptive, personalized learning, there's different levels to it, and there's kind of different in the ways that we implement them. So the first one is profiling. This has been around for quite a while. So this you can more or less do on your traditional LMS, and we're starting to look at it differently as well. But it's the what's your job, and then depending on what your job and how long you've been doing it, it will point you to particular bits of learning. Slightly more sophisticated is doing pre-tests. So you ask people a bunch of questions. I mean, I really like this kind of approach in something like your data protection, where you need to renew it every 2 years or so. So actually, rather than putting someone through an hour-long course, you can ask them 20 questions that they can answer in a few minutes. If they get them all right, it's like, that's fine, you're done, and that's all they need to do. So that's another way of kind of personalizing learners. But the adaptive one just takes it that step further. It really starts looking at kind of personalizing that journey, giving lots of different options, and making sure that people have have the tools that they need. So adaptive learning isn't something that you can put on top of on your current kind of your existing learning. So this is what happens pretty much at the moment. We have it's meant to be 3 different learners. We should have given them different colour tops probably, but they are different people. They just don't look like they are. And they would have all gone through an e-learning module or a face-to-face piece of training in the same way. With adaptive learning, this is where micro-learning starts to come into its own as well. You have this much more layered approach to learning. So it might be that everyone comes in and does the first piece, but then depending on what they answer, or depending on what they're looking at, what they're spending more time on, you can start to tailor it. So learner A might take that path through it, learner B could take this path, and learner C takes that path. There's different ways of doing it, and I'll come on to some of those shortly. It may be because they've answered questions in a particular way. It might be that you've got them to rate their understandings, things like that. But it starts to tailor it. So this is kind of what we're talking about here. It's basically saying it's not a panacea. It's something that you really need to do from the ground up. And I'll start to talk about some of the ways that we can do that shortly. But just before I do, I just want to kind of come on to some examples. Sorry, I'm not sure of the animation of my slide, but it's going to go to the next one, so I'm looking a bit confused. So has anyone used Duolingo? Yeah. if you haven't used it, I love it. My nearly 10-year-old daughter has just discovered it as well and started using it to learn French. But it's basically an app, and what it does is kind of almost takes away that argument that I don't have time to learn a language. I'd love to. I've always said I'd love to, and just never have quite got around to it, because it does it in kind of like 10-minute bite-sized chunks, basically, and it reminds you. It's on your phone. It comes up in the same way anything else would, saying you haven't done this today. But the reason that it works, the intelligence behind it, is that if you get something wrong, rather than just getting you to repeat it over and over until you get it right, it just kind of moves on. But what it does is it moves on to the next bit, but then it will keep sneaking it back round. And so eventually you pick up on those bits that you have forgotten or that you've never quite grasped. And hopefully by the time you get further on, then it will enable you to do that. But yeah, it's definitely worth having a look at if you're interested in something like that. So another way of doing it, I put the website on here. I was going to try and do a demo, but I wasn't too sure whether the internet would work so well. So Cogbooks is really good personalized learning, adaptive learning. What it does is it's mainly used in very in-depth training programs. So you're talking about kind of undergraduate degree level. So that level of content, because that's one thing that we've discovered, is you do need depth to be able to do personalized learning really well a lot of the time. So the way it works is basically you start working through, and it asks you at the end of each unit, kind of, can you grade your understanding of this? And if you kind of say, oh yeah, I kind of got it, it sort of says, okay, well, move on then. And then it will go through the next bit, and then it asks you again, kind of, well, does that make sense? And what it's doing is it's judging each time, and it remembers what you said back here. And if you're still saying that you're not 100% by the time you're 3 units on, it can then rework out and actually give you a bit more to back that up. So it's quite a clever program, and the feedback on it, it's mainly been used in the States at the moment in a couple of the universities, is that learners love it. The time spent actually, because I mean this is a blended approach, so learners are doing this kind of before they go into the classroom basically. So the tutors are saying that they can just really concentrate on the really interesting bits, and they can it also reports on what people are struggling on. So they can just look at one of their tutor groups and go, oh, nobody seemed to get that, right, let's spend some time on that, rather than going through everything. Okay, so we've talked kind of around personalised learning, the importance of it, and how it's kind of currently being implemented. What I'm going to go on to talk about now, you see, what I did do is move some of these around. I think the animation shows that. I didn't notice. But anyway, it's there now. Yeah, so talk about the journey that we've been on at Learning Pool and some of the ways that we are looking to approach some of this. So focus is at the bottom. So basically starting from the bottom and working up. At the bottom is things that we already have. And then kind of as we go up, we're working towards things that either we're in discussions about, looking at how we can implement, and then kind of ones that we want to look at in the future. So focus, target learning at different groups in your organisation. This is in Totara, which is the LMS platform that we use. So this is to do with audiences, so that you can kind of steer people by who they are and what role they have to particular bits of learning. The guide, so saving time by tailoring content based on existing knowledge. I don't know if many of you have come across the Adapt authoring tool, but it's one that Learning Pool use quite a lot. We have catalogue content and we use it for that so that our customers can edit it. And one of the things that we've been asked for a lot is something called guided revision. And you can use that in two ways. You can either kind of take someone all the way through an e-learning module, and then they get to the end and they are then ask some questions, and then the ones that they get wrong, you send them back to revise it basically. But the same technology can also be used to do the pre-test thing, so whereby you let people do the test at the beginning, and then that tailors their learner journey basically. They end up with their own little menu of things that they need to work through. Okay? So revise, this is space practice. We have a tool called Encore that plugs into LMSs basically, and what it does is you set it so that it can either be done on a face-to-face event, or it could be done on an individual learner's kind of completion of an e-learning module. And then it sends, you can do it two ways. You could do it to email, but the best way to do it is through to an app on your phone. And then you can basically set kind of like, okay, in 2 days, let's remind them of this. And then 5 days, a week, 2 weeks. And so just taking the really key points and refreshing those for people. And those reminders can take kind of a number of different forms. They might be questions about the content. They might be different videos. They could be to an article that you've seen that you think would be useful for people to look at. So there's lots of different options on that. The next step is curation. So curation isn't something I've talked about a huge amount, but I mean, again, algorithms and artificial intelligence are allowing a lot better curation of content. As we said earlier, the kind of the little girl in the fire hose, it's worth looking at how we can alleviate some of that for our learners and help steer them towards the things that might be useful for them. So we, if many of you come across Anders Pink, we're working with them at the moment to see how that can be, their tools can be plugged into a Totara LMS as well. So that'll be something that you can, as an organisation, look to kind of put in there. Adapt, personalised learning, adapting to your needs. Again, as I said, you need some kind of depth of content with kind of really looking at adapting learning. So we're looking probably predominantly or initially at using financial services content, because there's an awful lot that people who work in financial services need to know. We have similar levels of content in social care as well. And again, it's about kind of steering it towards people so that they know, so that they can easily find their own pathway through. So that's something that we're looking at. The search one is quite an interesting one, and that's probably the fullest artificial intelligence one. There's, again, you may want to Google this because I didn't know much about it until fairly recently, but something called Ibm Watson. It's basically kind of an artificial intelligence engine that we're looking to plug in, and what it will allow us to do is to basically do kind of real word searches. So as if you, say if you had within your organisation, if you use Yammer or Slack or some other type of messenger thing that you use for different departments, you would be able to type into it kind of, I'm about to do a performance review and I know it's going to be really difficult, okay? And so the way that IBM Watson works is it learns idioms, so you could basically plug loads of content into it. It learns, it's then taught by experts as well, so you can't just give it raw data, you need to teach it, but it does, I'm struggling to think of examples now, I'm sure you can, but that we say a lot of things in the English language that make no sense at all if you take them down to a computer kind of level. But what it means is that computer programs are basically learning to work with kind of real speech rather than just database structures where you used to have to put everything in. They can now start to figure out what you mean and they get the underlying message as well. And what those searches might return, it might be a piece of e-learning, but equally it might be, it could just be a document, it could be an article from the web, it could be anything. So that's kind of some of the stuff we're looking to do. And then sharing, this is one of the hardest ones to do, I think, sometimes in organisations. I know that we've tried kind of with different customers about having kind of forums where people really are meant to engage with each other and talk to each other, but you really do need someone kind of driving that. So we're looking at if there's a way that we can kind of make that more integrated as well. So there's lots going on. And but there's also lots of tools out there to help you do it. It's like this stuff is starting to kind of become quite normal and be kind of quite well used. So yeah, that's it. I'll leave you with a quote that's up there. Artificial intelligence solves problems that baffle most humans. Basically what it does is give you kind of computer level power to try and achieve some of these kind of goals that we've probably had for quite a long time. So that's it. If you've got any questions, I can stay here, or the Learning Pool stand is over there, and thank you for your time.